researchers showed kids a bunch of pictures and they asked them what looks fun. And in the picture, there were kids doing things. And they would point at the pictures that looked the most fun. 100% of the time, not a single kid pointed at a picture where there was an adult present in the picture. Even if the adult wasn't even engaging with them, they were just in the background, it didn't look fun to them. And so again, when kids go to practice and go to train, they go to play with other kids. They don't go to listen to adults anyway. So you're not part of their world, so to speak. You're more of a hindrance than something they look forward to.
All right, so today I'm joined by Greg Souders, the man largely responsible for popularizing the constraints-led approach in jiu-jitsu, founder of Standard Jiu-Jitsu, and also the coach for the CJI2 Americas team. Greg, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
So, Greg, I want to hear a little bit about, in your own words, I don't mean to be repetitive, by the way. I know you've talked about this on a lot of podcasts, but I'm going to try to ask some questions that aren't as repetitive because, you've really piqued my interest with this new approach. So I do want to hear the explanation in your own words, kind of your elevator pitch of what the constraints-led approach really is.
Okay. So recently I did the Simple Man podcast with the B team. And I think the way that I described it there is probably the most user-friendly. And it's basically a way to contextualize and scale live resistance training. It's a way that we take all of the context or the relevant context within a training environment, and we keep everything together that's necessary to affect someone's performance when they're playing the whole game. So the whole game being the difference between the little things we do in training and the thing we're training for, which is the big performance, the tournament, the match. So
right. Okay. So my understanding of that is that you're trying to make the training environment the most realistic, so that it transfers as easily as possible. The skills transfer to competition.
Exactly right. I think transfer is the right word to use there. The idea is that training should have an effect that affects our ability to perform at some later date. And that process of the things that happen in training versus the things that affect us on that date is called transfer. And the constraint-led approach is a way that we constrain the live environment in such a way that we can get more transfer than we otherwise would by decontextualizing or decoupling the things we do in training from the actual performance.
Right. Okay. I'm following with that. So when you first started this approach, or I guess I want to ask a little bit more about how you first encountered it. So were you seeking something out to solve a problem you were seeing in jiu-jitsu, or did you come across this in a completely different context and be like, oh, hey, I think this would work well with training jiu-jitsu?
It was actually really simple. I don't think I understood how to coach or how to teach. I didn't really understand what was happening. I never really studied skill or how to develop skill or learning or how to learn appropriately. I just did what I was always told to do. And so I was just curious. Curiosity really got me started. And as I poked around, I realized there's a whole field of study about learning and movement and how we acquire skill. And so I just started delving into it, and I bumped into the constraints-led approach.
And when you started, was it like, did you kind of just go all in, or did you kind of trickle it in a little bit, test it out, try out the waters and see how it worked?
Well, I'm an all-in type of guy usually. So, I guess I went all in. As soon as I heard about it, it was convincing. And again, it wasn't like I read about it one day and the next day I was like, oh my God, this is it. When I came across it, it just piqued my interest, and I started reading pretty heavily within a few days. And then I wondered, oh, can I apply this? Because I really didn't know how it would transfer to grappling, because as I searched more about the ideas, nobody was using it in any grappling context. I couldn't find judoka using it. I couldn't find wrestlers using it. So I basically had to start from scratch, and I had to try to understand it the best I could and apply it as I understood it. So even though I was sort of convinced and I knew I wanted to use it pretty soon, I didn't understand it right away. And I would slowly just kind of experiment and try to apply what I thought I was understanding.
Right. Well, when I was looking into it, I tried to read some of the articles that you'd mentioned in previous interviews, and I came across a bunch of really unique disciplines that they were applying the CLA to. For example, like nursing students and law students, and I hadn't really considered the fact that this can be so widespread and applicable as well. So, and I really think that it takes a lot of creativity too to figure out how to apply it to something new. Because when I first came across those articles, I was like, I can't picture how they would possibly use this to teach nursing students how to put in an IV. Like, that just seems so ridiculous. But they did that in a study.
Well, for sure. I mean, think about what happens when you have to grab somebody's arm and you have to deal with a live person. You're feeling the turgor of their flesh. You're feeling the slipperiness of their skin. You're feeling their nerve, their nervousness. You're nervous because you might slip. You know you're going to hurt them. So all those little things are contextually relevant, and they're going to affect how well you basically interpret these things that you're interacting with to finally accomplish your task. So training in an environment where we have bits of novelty like somebody's nerves or the sweat on the skin or the tension on the surface can really affect how well a nurse does their job, or in this case, putting in an IV. So it's this idea that constraints themselves or the things that limit options affect the movements that come out to try to solve problems within that space.
That's so interesting. So when you did start with the CLA, what issues or challenges or failures did you encounter in those first little while?
Well, I guess two things really popped up right away is I didn't have a language to talk about what we were doing without referring to the thing we were doing. So at first, like I thought I had to show moves and techniques so I could tell people what they were called. And that was very limiting for me because I didn't see that it was just humans doing human things to other humans that made the moves emerge. And so I sort of had to draw back from this technique oriented understanding to a more human to human understanding. So that was the first challenge. I had to develop a language to try to tell people what to do that again that didn't refer directly to the thing itself. And I think the second struggle I had was trying to understand the relationships that cause the emergence of specific behaviors. To simplify that, it would be something like, as we're grappling, why do we see things happen? Why do one person's actions affect another, and what comes out of that? I didn't understand what relationships were causing what right away, and so I think those were my two biggest struggles when I first started applying it
Right.
anyway.
Yeah, it seems to me from listening to you talk about this, that in order to teach ecologically, you have to have a much deeper understanding of jiu-jitsu than the demands of like a traditional coach in terms of like they can just repeat the movement that they learned from their coach. So it seems like you need a really much deeper understanding of the intricacies that you just described, as well as you've mentioned previously, like invariance of each position.
For
So I think
sure.
that that's really interesting as well.
Well, if you think about it, we're moving from replication to creation. So if you take any field and you want to learn how to use your medium to create something that hasn't been created before, you have to know your medium deeply. And we can start by copying, by replicating. This at least lets us interact with our subject. But once we hit a line of uncertainty, what do we do next? You know, what are we going to look at and what are we going to pull from if we reach a boundary where there are no more answers? So creativity is going to have to come into play then. And I think the more we know about a subject, the more creative we can become with these lines of uncertainty.
Right. So, do you think, with your experience in teaching students the constraints-led approach, do you think that the constraints-led approach is for everybody, or do you think it suits certain types of learners better?
No, not at all, because it's not a thing that's separated from human behavior. The constraints-led approach is a method that emerged from the understanding of perception and action. So when a perceiving being like us acts out onto the world, how do those two things affect each other? Well, there's really three things. They typically say perception, or the things we see about the world, the actions, the things that we do, and then the cognitive space, or how our mind, so to speak, is interacting with that whole thing. And so it's really a deeper question on why and how humans move. And CLA has birthed from that. So it's again taking a scientific understanding of the constraints present in the human movement system and applying it to sport.
Right.
So
Okay. That's
we're
interesting.
talking
Yeah.
about humans, not like certain people. Like, you know what I mean? It's not like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
tool for that person, that tool for this person, or this learning style, or whatever.
Yeah. And if we're, mobile at birth, we all learn how to move at some point. So I guess it is applicable to everyone.
Well, for sure. I mean, actually, a lot of the original studies were done in early childhood development. So Eleanor Gibson focused a lot of, or J.J. Gibson's wife, and also a huge researcher in the space who made a lot of headway with understanding it, looked at children. And a lot of the people who came after her did that too, to try to understand how and why we move, because in that early developmental stages, there's so much going on. I mean, we're doing some of the most complex things we'll ever do. In our first 5 years of life, developing language, developing movement, and it all kind of happens under the hood.
Yeah, I love thinking about it from this angle because I studied I studied this in school. I studied early, I guess, developmental neuroscience. So I learned a lot about like how we learn how to speak, how we learn how to move, and that kind of thing. And I think another thing that really helped me, or that really piqued my curiosity about this, is that a lot of how kids learn is through play. So I wanted to ask you if you think that may be part of why you're finding so much success in this, is that your students are doing more play. They're playing games, they're having fun. Do you think that helps with their learning?
For sure. I kind of think of play as like physical exploration. So we're doing random things to the world and we're getting interactions from the world. And so it's that coupled relationship. It's a being acting in a world that offers opportunities to act. And that's what play is. It's again moving against the thing without knowing what the outcome is going to be. And those opportunities are what create future opportunities, both perceptively and actively. And it's just something we do to figure out the effects of our actions. So whether we call it play or just physical experimentation, I think it's all the same thing. I think that little kids are sort of primed to do this for whatever reason. They don't really have these abstract judgments about why and what they're doing. They just do. Whereas adults start to think about more deep concepts like failure or feeling silly. So they tend to act out and move less onto the world, which I think inhibits their ability to learn as they age.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. That's so true that kids just have no thoughts. They're just there to explore and like, explore their curiosity, do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, they just
That's
want
so
to play and
funny.
have fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I help coach some of the kids' classes at my gym, and it's just like we're trying to be serious. We're trying to learn a submission, and they're like 7 years old, and they just can't be serious about it sometimes. But I
Yeah.
love to see it because they're also, learning it in their own way.
For sure. I actually don't think, just to jump on it, because I love teaching kids, by the way, it's 5 to 7 year olds is my specialty. I taught them for 10 years. And if I didn't have to deal with parents, I would still teach 5 to 7s. I think it's a great age. And I don't think seriousness is a part of the learning process for children. I think it's developing a strong, robust movement system and exposure to the world. It's more important than anything because seriousness comes at a time when we actually can be serious and we choose it for ourselves. So to impose seriousness on a child is to, in my mind, ruin what it is to be a child. So I don't know. I just don't. Seriousness for kids is not for me.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think I can try to follow that a little bit better. It's kind of like we're imposing our adult instincts to like it's a submission, we have to be serious, you can get hurt. But I think you're right. I can definitely do better. And I think most people that teach kids can do better about making it more fun as well.
I've
So,
actually been sharing this fact with somebody. I can't even remember where I read this because we talk with people about kids training a lot. And there was this thing they did where researchers showed kids a bunch of pictures and they asked them what looks fun. And in the picture, there were kids doing things and they would point at the pictures that looked the most fun. 100% of the time, not a single kid pointed at a picture where there was an adult present in the picture. Even if the adult wasn't even engaging with them, they were just in the background. It didn't look fun to them. And so again, when kids go to practice and go to train, they go to play with other kids. They don't go to listen to adults anyway. So you're not part of their world, so to speak. You're more of a hindrance than something they look forward to.
that's so interesting. Yeah, I would love to read that study. So moving on. So you've had students that have joined you since they were day one white belts, and you've also had students join you with a jiu-jitsu background already. You know that background coming from traditional learning and drilling. So what differences do you see between the two groups, and do you feel like they approach the games differently, at least like for the first little while?
For sure. I think when I get people that come in with previous experience, they come in with also expectations of the learning process, about what learning looks like, about how it should feel, how it should seem. And I think breaking down those expectations is a thing that I have to do most of the time with people with previous experience. But if I get people a little younger, a little more fresh to the process, I don't have to really do that. I'm giving them an initial experience rather than spending time breaking expectations or changing expectations. So that's the main difference I generally see. Now, of course, there's outliers on both sides. Like DeAndre is a great outlier. He came with 10 years of experience, but he was so open-minded. He was able to embrace what I was asking of him with almost no resistance at all, which is pretty rare for someone with that much experience.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so another thing I've been wondering about in terms of like the practicality of the constraints-led approach is how do you normally choose to pair people up? Like, do you use a skill disadvantage or size disadvantage as like a kind of constraint for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So the size of the partner that is in front of you will affect the quality of the movement that emerges from your interaction. The skill disparity will also affect that. And so we use it to sort of manipulate levels of intensity, challenge point difficulties. We use it to basically add variation, take away variation, increase difficulty, decrease difficulty. Yeah. So it all affects everything, and we use it. We try to use it accordingly anyway.
Okay, interesting. Another kind of constraint that I wanted to ask about is I can picture, I haven't tried training ecological. I'm down to do it. I would love to try. But I can imagine if I was training ecologically and like we're doing mostly games and like constrained sparring the whole time, I would probably get exhausted by the end of class. So do you use fatigue or just like the tiredness that develops over the class as a learning tool as well? Like how do you put that into your class?
That's a great question. And actually, I was just thinking about this a little more deeply last night as to how I can use fatigue more intelligently. So just a quick little background. So we tend to do, when we do movements, they stabilize. And they stabilize under different levels of perturbation or change. So one change that can affect a stable system is speed. So if we have people operating at like a 10-minute pace, the movements that they'll be able to do will stabilize under what it's required to act for 10 minutes. But if I train a bunch of people for 3 minutes, the movements that may have been very effective in 10 minutes might start to destabilize because the speed that's required to finish in 3 minutes goes up. Fatigue is also something like that. So let's say, for example, you're very fresh and we're starting off with the first round of the day. The way the movements will emerge and look and how effective they will be directly linked to the level of fatigue that they're currently experiencing. So having said all of that, let's imagine we want to challenge a nice stable movement. Let's say we have somebody who can do something very well when they're fresh. Well, we might not add that constraint until they are really fatigued. Let's say someone's really good at finishing on legs when they're fresh, but they're not so good when they're fatigued. We might wait till that fatigue state to have them play games where they're working on, let's say, brake mechanics on the legs, for example.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense. I had a feeling you would have something insightful to say about that, and definitely like that would play a role in when I get the chance to train ecologically. But another question that you brought up is, do you have everybody doing the same games, or do you be like, hey, DeAndre, you do this today, your partner does this, and then you kind of assign games to different people at different times, so it's what's best for their learning in jiu-jitsu?
In a perfect world, that's what I would like to do. I think the constraint of a generalized class makes it very difficult to coach in that way. Not impossible, just difficult. I think that's something that could help me, for example, if I had a few other instructors. It's only me. So it makes specialized attention at some times very difficult. So we try to mitigate that in two specific ways. So everybody in each class gets 10 minutes at the end to determine what they do with that last 10 minutes. They can call me over, they can ask for help, they can choose the rounds that interest them the most, they can even sit and have a conversation. It's completely up to what they think they need or they want to experience. So each class, there's a moment where students can take control of what they do on their own. We also have a day where we do that too. So on Thursdays here, we let people choose their own constraints, their own games. They get to design their own practice for the hours that they're here. And I'm there present to help if people need the help. So I'll walk over to individuals and give them things to work on. I also do this through private lessons as well. When people take private lessons with me, I cater the training to whatever they need. But yes, if I could do that, I think that would be optimal.
Yeah. No, I love that idea though of having people take a bit more of a leadership role in their kind of learning. And, I also think that it's a skill to be self-aware and being like asking yourself, what do I need right now? What would be best for me to learn? Because I think a lot of people in jiu-jitsu just go to class and like the showing up is the thing, and they're not really so in tuned with the things that they need at the time. If it's just a conversation, or if it's like, oh man, I'm getting smashed in half guard every class. Like, we can kind of be a little bit in denial as well. So I think that you're asking your students to do that, and that would be, helping them be more aware of their jiu-jitsu journey, so to speak.
For sure. I feel like people who take accountability for their own training or really desire it or get excited about taking control of their own development, I think learn at a faster rate, because anyone who takes responsibility for the thing they do tends to engage more with it. And I've also read, and it suggests that basically having a sense of autonomy, a sense of purpose, and a sense of mastery is very motivating for people. So trying to offer them that on a daily basis or at least a weekly basis, I think can strengthen their bond with why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that idea. So throughout this whole process of implementing the constraints-led approach, how has your own thinking changed since just starting it to now? I believe you're like a decade into training your students this way, right?
I am, yeah. I mean, very poorly for the first few years and then getting better slowly. I think in the last 5 years, I've made some huge headway in my understanding and ability to use this. But yeah, I guess a couple things. I trust the students. I remember when I first started coaching, I had the same view that everyone did, that the coach was a central figure. He knew what was right. He delivered it down, top down, right? But now I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I'm just part of the system and I'm more of a guide. And so I really trust the messiness, the coordination process, the attunement process, and I let it happen right in front of me. And I'm not so quick to step in when I think learning is occurring. I kind of let things happen as they are. I'm much more relaxed during that process than I ever have been. And that's, I think, the main change in my mind anyway.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought up how it's kind of changed your perspective as a coach. Because I wanted to ask, like, how does training your students ecologically change the role of a coach? I know you've talked in previous interviews about the coach now has to be the game designer. They have to have such a deep understanding of jiu-jitsu. They have to have creativity to be able to come up with appropriate games for their students. But yeah, how do you see that this changes the role of a coach?
Well, I see myself now as a practice designer. So I help communicate with my students in a relationship to determine what tasks we can manipulate, what environmental factors we can manipulate to help our students get the best environment to get the information they need to create new abilities or challenge their current ones. So again, I see myself as more of a guide, a game designer versus a knowledge teller. Like I'm not the guy who stands in front of the class and delivers a bunch of facts about the nature of grappling and grappling exchanges. So I think that's really the change for me. Again, my job is to design the practice, then help guide it along as students bump into problems and then need my interaction.
Okay, and so what do you think is the most common mistake that you see when coaches first start implementing the constraints-led approach?
Using it to make certain techniques happen. That's like the most common one. It's like, oh, I really like duck unders. I want my students to do duck unders, which is fine. There's really nothing wrong with sort of approaching like that, I don't think. But if we get too specific, we ruin the strength of CLA, which is to create flexible and adaptable movers who can respond to variable and novel challenges in real time. And so we want to leave room for that. So yeah, so that's the biggest mistake I see right away. Also, another huge mistake is being very vague. A lot of people, when they first hear about self-organization or the process of self-organization, they think a coach just stands back and doesn't get involved. So they create these practices where the students are just left almost to their own devices with no real direction. And so it can be a little confusing for some coaches when they first start using it, and definitely confusing for the students.
Right. Do you think that have you had this experience where you've tried to implement a game and you're realizing like after like 30 seconds or 45 seconds, you're like, oh man, like this isn't planning out the way that I thought it would. It's either like not targeting the thing I thought it would target, or like the students have found like a loophole that they didn't realize was not what I was asking for. So I was talking to my dad about your approach, and he used to coach my soccer teams, and apparently he was doing something like this back when I was young, and he actually wanted me to ask you this question because he had this experience all the time. He was like, they're gaming the system. This is not what I wanted them to work on. So yeah, when do you choose to call it, or do you make adjustments, or do you just scrap it and try something new when that happens?
Yeah, so let's say I make a mistake. Let's say I design a practice task and the task don't create the opportunity for the relationship that I want. I made a mistake, but I get to see my mistake in real time. Just like if I were a student seeing my mistake in real time, we can use the result of that mistake to change what we might want to do next. So I let it play out for the duration of whatever time I have set to engage in that task. And then I don't really say anything because I'm like, dang, because I don't want to take them away from whatever learning experience they're having, right? Because even though my game might have been poorly designed, they're still having an experience that could induce some learning or a level of skill acquisition. So I just kind of find out where the mistake was if I made one, and then I just try to adjust it on the fly where I think I could. Otherwise, I just move on and I'll think about it later when I'm at home reflecting on my practice design. But this happens often. We're dealing with a complex and chaotic system, and sometimes we don't know how the parts are going to interact until we put it out there. Even with a perfectly designed game, if you think everything's going to go right, one thing could make it go in the opposite direction. You might not have been prepared for that, and that's okay.
Right. That's probably a pretty valuable lesson for most coaches when they first start implementing CLA. I'm sure it takes practice to learn how to design effective games and learn how to parse through what it is that you're trying to focus on and elicit learning for your students. I'm sure that takes a lot of practice as well.
I think it does. I mean, I had the, advantage of teaching 21 classes a week when I first started. So, I was just teaching like crazy. I was teaching 7 days a week, so many classes, and I could constantly experiment and experiment and experiment until I feel like I was getting it right. And I also didn't have like an overlord hovering over me telling me what I should or shouldn't or could or couldn't do. So I think that I had a huge advantage. I basically had my own little lab where I was free to work. And I think that was very beneficial to me.
Right. So most people, like when they start a gym, they start thinking about like, oh, like what's my curriculum going to be? How can I ensure that the classes that I'm teaching are, making my students become well-rounded people, that I'm not going to really leave any holes? Do you have any, I mean, this is kind of like not a perfectly thought out question. I just thought of it on the spot, but like, do you have any thought towards how to develop well-rounded grapplers?
Yeah,
Do you have like kind of like a curriculum of games that you go through?
yeah, for sure. So what I did was I tried to parse out the big states that we see emerge in grappling. So the three big states as I see them are standing, the stuff that happens when we're on our feet or have base points on the ground, stuff that happens in guards, that's in front of or using your legs, putting them in front of people. And then we have pins. This is when we pass legs and hold people down chest to chest or chest to back. So as grapplers engage in the whole game, we see these phase transitions between these states, standing, guarded, pinned, and they keep going back and forth. So what I tried to do is I tried to focus on developing my students in each of these big areas. So stuff that happens on the feet, stuff that happens in guards, stuff that happens in pins. And we call this playing the whole game. And so in each class, we do a little bit of each, frequently throughout the week, so that we give our students lots of exposure to the big pieces of jiu-jitsu that you will have to engage in when you play the whole game. And so I feel like as long as we do that frequently, with enough focus, that we prepare our students for the things that are going to happen as they play.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And you just released a standing instructional,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So, what has the reception been for that? And like, do you have a plan to like further your instructionals? Like, how does an instructional work for like an ecological approach as well? I have a lot of questions about this.
Well, we've been working on this for a while. We've done so many iterations of this, and I didn't like any of them. Some of the instructors had too much knowledge about, which is basically a bunch of facts about jiu-jitsu. Some had none and were just games, and that was kind of useless. So we were trying to find a mix between sharing some facts, not only about jiu-jitsu, but about game design, while also giving students a practical way to engage right away. We want people to turn it on, be able to watch for at least 5 minutes and have something they can just turn it off and go to practice and do. And not just this, oh, I guess I'll look for inside position today, but something that's, more usable. Like start with these few games, see what you get, and see what you can change about it as you gain experience here. So anyway, we kept it short, we kept it sweet, and we kept it practical. And we try to focus on what we call stereotypical engagements. So with the standing situation, we focused on historical engagements that are very common for new players, like getting our hands in between elbows or under elbows or behind elbows, or stereotypical connection points like connecting to the shoulders, connecting to the hips, and connecting to the legs. So this way, our students have a focus of intention based on things that we know historically are going to happen in a standing situation to get them started on learning how to do things from there.
Right. And so is this style of instructional appropriate like for those that don't have access to an ecological coach and don't have access to ecological training? So they would just go to class, and when they roll, they practice this kind of thing? Or who is this for?
It's literally for anybody. It's for coaches who want to see maybe how I might have designed a few games to help my students learning something, or it's for students who want to start learning something right away by just playing the game. So I try to make it for both. So basically what we did was I would talk about a game and why we're going to play it one way. I would give the task constraints of the game itself, and then I'd have my two students play. And then as they play, I sit in the background and commentate based on what I'm seeing. And that's what the digital content is like. So I feel like there's a little bit in there for everybody. And what we're doing is actually we're getting a lot of feedback so we can do something different next. So how is the community interacting with it? What do they like? What do they dislike? What can we change to make it more user friendly so people can actually gain value from interacting with that content?
Right. It's great that you have that line open to receive feedback for future iterations. This does bring up a question for me. Is for someone like myself, my gym does like pretty structured training sessions. Um, there's not really a time I can think of when I could be like, hey, let's do this thing. Let's do like a constrained kind of game, blah, blah, blah. So I guess I'm wondering what kind of games or things can I do like without my partner knowing or being involved in? Do you have a couple ideas of like
Yeah.
things that grapplers can do when they're just in a regular class, but they can be training in a specific type of ecological way for themselves?
For sure. And the simplest way is just bringing an intention with you for the rounds that you're going to do. So you can actually use your own gym structure. So let's imagine that your gym does situational sparring every day. And they tell you what situations you're going to work on each week. And you know that you're going to work on chest to chest pinning, or let's say mount position, or in the close guard. So what you can do is you can collect some experience, let's say on Monday in those situational rounds, for mount and close guard. And then afterwards, you can reflect on it like, what did I do well? What did I do poorly? What's something I could focus on tomorrow? And basically, through reflection, you can take those intentions and you can try to bring them with you into those situational rounds. And you don't have to tell anybody because it could be something as simple as trying to put their hands on the mat from the bottom of close guard. You're just trying to use your legs to pull them forward and get their hands to touch the mat as many times as possible. And just keep it to yourself, keep it a little secret. They don't have to know what's going on, but you know what your focus of intention is. And that's going to allow you to see the results of not only your intentions, but your actions. Was I able to accomplish the thing I set out to do?
Right. That makes sense. I'm definitely gonna try that next week. I'm
For
looking forward
sure.
to it.
I also
Yeah.
urge people to try to find some private time. See if your gym is gracious enough to let you use the mat maybe 30 minutes after class and grab another friend who's curious about exploring these things with you and just share a game with them and play along and just see what you learn from it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, most gyms have open mats. I'm sure most gyms would be cool with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to talk a little bit about CJI too. So,
Okay.
what do you think about CJI 2 being like a teams quintet style tournament?
I think it's very cool. Unfortunately, we're a misfit team, so we had to gather people together and try to create a cohesive team in a relatively short amount of time. And we had to get guys who've never trained with each other and to compete with each other to actually come together. But I think it's a really interesting thing. I think for the already established teams, it's very cool. And for the misfits teams, it offers a unique challenge. I don't know, so I think it's great. I'm incredibly excited to be part of it and to even be asked to take on this role. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a super cool tournament style thing. Not a lot of people have seen quintet, so I think it's going to really put that style of grappling into the public eye a little bit more. So yeah, you mentioned you obviously have to gather up your own team, and you've mentioned that you're not going to do a trials to do so. You're going to just pick
Yeah.
people based on qualities that you are looking for. So I guess what I'm asking for is you've already announced DeAndre Corbet for your 66 kilo grappler. How are you going about choosing the rest of your competitors, and what kind of qualities are you emphasizing in this search?
Okay. So basically, I'm looking for the merits that the people we're inviting have already accomplished. So what have they done competitively? How high have they reached? Um, how do they grapple? The thing is this is like a sudden event, and I don't want to create another tournament to lead to another tournament. We already have a lot of that. I really want to give these athletes who've kind of been in the background working an opportunity to just get an invite based on the stuff they've already accomplished. Like I said on the thing that the CGI thing when they asked me is like I was just invited on, like I didn't have to fight other coaches or come to other coaches to get it. So I don't know.
I'd pay some good money for that.
I think a lot of people would. People would love to see you get beat up. But no, I think it's really fun to reach out, see who's interested, look at their past, and select them based on what they've historically have done. I have 66, of course, filled, and I have prospects for 77, 88, and a few for the 99 spots. I'll know for my 77, 88 here pretty soon, and I'm really looking forward to the yeses that come from these gentlemen. Um, yeah, no, I just want to select people based on stuff they've already done and give them an opportunity to go out and shine. Have some
Right.
fun.
So are you looking a little bit at
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
like yeah, so are you looking a little bit at their proven success in open weight brackets as a heavy emphasis?
I'm really looking for people that have strong finishing percentages, regardless whether it be within their weight class or within absolute weight classes. A lot of the smaller guys don't do absolutes, but are they trying to finish? I know this is a thing people always go for the finish, but there are some people that actually do that, that actually take risks, that actually train to finish. And those are who we're looking at. So for our 66, 77, 88, we have some guys that are definitely finishers. Right now, my struggle is looking for the 99.99 plus. We're looking for, guys who historically submitted a lot of their opponents on their way through their development. So yeah, finishers are what we're looking for.
Right. Okay. And so you've mentioned that you plan on bringing everybody to standard and training. Is that still the plan?
Yep. So we have an idea of how we want to do that. But basically, I want the guys together for at least the last 8 weeks. So the last 8 weeks leading up to it, if they can manage it, we're going to try to get everybody in this room so we can develop just some camaraderie amongst each other. And, we can develop some of these guys in our style over this 8 weeks and see what effect it has out there at CJI. Because, it's a challenge for me too. That's, can I take strangers that I've never worked with and can I affect them enough in a short enough time to help bring them success out here in this competitive setting? And so I like that idea.
Right. Okay. And do you plan on building a pit or some kind of angled wall for them to practice with that?
So we have a gym close to us that's offering usage of their gym. So what we might do is just solely focus on skill development without even worrying about the constraint of the wall. And then on the weekends, go down to this guy's school and do some just open round training in that environment to sort of like our end of the week fun stuff. So, even though that the slanted wall does offer a new challenge to grapplers, I don't think it should be the central focus. I really don't. I think that we're going to get a lot of work done without using it, and that's what I'm going to try to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so you mentioned obviously that this is challenging for you to have to build a team. There are people you've never worked with before, and another big challenge with that is each competitor has their own specific desires from their coach in their corner. So obviously these are people that you likely would have never cornered before. So how do you plan to learn how to best corner people who you've never cornered as they're
Well,
competing before?
that's exactly why I want them here. So I need to understand their habits, their emotions, their moods. What do they want from me? What do they not want from me? Because these students are only going to be with me temporarily, the job isn't for Greg Souders to take over. The job is for me to try to be the best coach for them that I can be in the short time that I have. And to be the best coach I can be, I must develop a relationship. Just like techniques, coach and student are also a relationship. So it's really trying to stay true to those principles and try to gain an opportunity to develop that. Would really be my goal with these guys.
Right. So I guess a question that I have about the constraints-led approach and this idea of learning how to best corner people is, do you have like plans for I guess like I'm thinking a little bit about how the competition is a super intense environment, and I guess you could try to model that environment best with constraints, short time periods, that kind of thing, to like amp up the intensity and see how they react in that kind of environment. Or I don't know. I don't want you to share too much of your game plan. I'm just curious.
No, I'm not the game plan type guy. I'm the fly by the seat of your pants type guy. I adapt to the situation as it unfolds. But no, I mean, what you're asking about is what type of task pressure will we put on the individuals as they train, and replicating some of the demands of that environment are definitely going to be part of the process. So for example, in a quintet style, if you win, you go on, you get to just fight right away. So that's something that we're going to bake into the training as well, to see how people deal with that, both from the smaller competitors, how far into the weights can they go, and also for the bigger competitors as well. So just getting people used to that, jumping from maybe a 66 guy to an 88 guy back to a 77 guy, and train them for that type of demand.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I was really curious to hear your thoughts on that, because yeah, I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of how how I guess the science behind the CLA approach works, I guess, a little bit. And so yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective on that. It's honestly so much more generalizable than I ever would have thought. But talking to you is really like clearing up a lot of these questions that I had. It's really interesting.
Well, it's great. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the science itself, is that since they're talking about the human movement system, we should be able to adapt our movements to any task demand, whether it be sport, climbing over a hill, or whatever it may be. You know what I mean? We do this in a specific way, and trying to understand how it happens, I think, allows us to really create this new tool for learning. So again, that's the beauty of it for me.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I do want to ask you, you've obviously been around jiu-jitsu for a long time. You've coached people from, white belt to, you know, great accolades in the sport. So what advice would you give to a brand new white belt that comes to you and says, "Hey, Greg, I want to be a champion"?
Typically, I have this rule: if someone comes to me and says that, they're probably not the guy or girl. Uh, so really, what I've noticed is people who really desire to do the work, they'll already be working. A lot of the people that have had success in my gym as they interact with me, are people who just came in every day and did what they were supposed to do, and they did it with desire, and they did it with passion, and they did it with direction. So when I meet those individuals, I try to flame that. I try to fan that flame. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, man, let's be more consistent. Let's be more focused. Let's create goals for ourselves. Let's try to reach those goals. How far do you want to go? And I just try to, get them pushing in that direction and try to commit to the things they say they want to become, or the things that they're actively trying to become. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I do agree with you that I think a lot of people that are super, super fired up about it in the beginning, kind of burn out a little bit. So the consistency thing is so important.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of my guys who kind of just stuck around have always been the quiet ones. I don't know why. It's the weirdest thing. Like I had a guy recently who's come to me, he's like, "Oh, my goal is to, be out there with you guys at the ADCC Opens." And as soon as those words came out of his mouth, I knew that he wasn't going to be the guy. And actually, 3 weeks later, I haven't seen him. And after like 3 weeks training, I haven't seen him since. And so this seems to be a common trend. I actually heard this thing that it's best not to say your goals out loud, because your mind or whatever doesn't know the difference. So you get the same little rush for saying a thing as you might do if you accomplish the thing. So it's better to kind of keep it on the inside and just work silently in your direction.
That's so interesting. And I guess when you think about it in practicality, if I was like, "Hey, I want to be ADCC champion," the response I'd get would be like, "That's so amazing. Great job, like you got this, girl," that kind of thing. And that would
Yeah.
feel pretty nice. So, yeah, actually I think Damien was talking about that on a previous Simple Man podcast as well. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's just something I've noticed. And whether it's true or not, it's just, my little anecdotal evidence for the things we say and their effect they have on us.
Right. Interesting. So is there anything that I missed that you want to mention before we finish up?
No, I mean, as long as you feel like I answered the questions that you had and spoke on the topics that you're interested in, I feel like, yeah, we're good.